records and things. What am I thinking about? Like data visualization experts. That's where so that there's a whole career that can be found, or a whole career that can be paved by just learning about aggregating data from a back end, right? So you have like your data store, and you basically could build your entire career around that paradigm, that idea. Cool, just muting everybody. So yeah, that idea is super cool. So think about it in these terms, with data aggregation. You're hired by a company to get business analytics reported to the company's team. So we had a business analytics person at Doba, a company I worked for, whose responsibility it was to report to the whole entire company. We were owned by MadeInChina.com, so a huge company, worth billions of dollars, bought us out for a significant price tag, and we were building software for like, what we did is like linked e-commerce stores up with like what do you call it? With like catalogs. So like Amazon web stores and eBay web stores and things like that. And then we needed to know what parts of our tools were actually working and what parts of things, users were clicking on and people were subscribing to, what type, how much money was coming in. And so we had a specific business analytics engineer, and her job was to provide these reports by doing these giant data aggregations, right? So any report that the CEO and CFO wanted and needed to see, that was her job full time, to provide that information. So it's something that I think is really cool. So that's kind of why I threw it in there. I threw it in there as a stretch goal, because we didn't cover it as a specific part of the curriculum, other than doing some sorting. That's one part of aggregation, but it's not the important part. So the more important part is taking data and displaying it in a different way, changing it, and doing that by adding things up, or getting a total count of things. So anyway, something you can play around with, and you'll definitely touch on a little bit more next week with SQL. But the rest of the sprint should have been pretty straightforward to y'all. Let's go through, or the mini sprint, I should say. Let me grab my sprint challenge thing. And share my screen. It's awesome. I only have one monitor today, so I should probably just share. Yeah, I'll just share my desktop. That's fine. Turn off all my notifications. Cool. All right, so these first questions, so describe the following: a database, a collection, and a document. What I was looking for here was something along the lines of, a database is a place to store information that you need access to late and needs to be permanent, right? So that's my definition of a database. Looking this up, you would find, probably dozens of, theses, papers out there online about like what databases are and the different types of databases. Here in our class, we teach you about Mongo and MySQL. There are plenty others out there that you can look into, but those two tend to be some of the most popular in their respected categories. So in Mongo, a database is really just a spot on your local machine or a spot in the cloud somewhere if you're using a cloud service that has a title. So you can access, db dot, show, like use budget. We're going to talk about budget. So it's like show DBS, show all the databases that we're connected to that live in this machine. And then we can use that use command as, entering into that database. So it's like use budget. We go and you use budget, and then you can say db.collections.show or .find and or show, I guess is what it is. Show all the collections or whatever. I don't remember all the commands. I could type them out really fast, but thinking about them is hard. So that's what a database is. It's a place where you can store collections. And then what's a collection? I want to see maybe a brief explanation of a collection in Slack. Should probably pull up Slack here. CS4. Hitting enter with authority, right? It's like, sorry. So collection is what? It's a grouping of documents. Beautiful, Teresa. That's a great explanation. Organized gathering of data. Yep. So you can think of collection. You have your database. You can think of collection like if you had a SQL document, and then every single tab was its own collection, right? So when I said SQL document, I really was thinking spreadsheet in my mind. So think of a spreadsheet, which it's like those two are used like synonymously in a lot of ways because they're very similar in behavior because you have tables, rows, and columns, right? So this table would be your so this will prologue into next week. So your table would be more of like your actual database name. So budget would be the table, right? And then each you could have multiple tables within that. So your collections would be your tables. And then like the data found there are like the documents that are found there are like all the, the rows and the columns and things like that. So yeah, collection is a grouping of specific type of data. Yep, slice of your database gathering section of your data. That's great. These are all great answers. They're all correct. We model out our collections using Mongoose schema, right? And so that's where we decide what our collections are going to be named. By the time we say mongoose.model and then pass it that model name, that becomes a collection of those single instances, right? Because that schema document is just simply or that schema function is just a constructor function that creates an instance. So it's going to create our document for us and save it into a collection that we label and we give it a name. So very important that we have access to these names, right? We have the ability to store stuff, then we have the ability to name what we store there, and then a document. So a document I just covered, and document is really just in Mongo terms, it's an object. It's just a JSON object, or eventually gets stored as a binary JSON object. Okay, describe how one can achieve the pattern of relationships in MongoDB. Okay, that's one question. So a description there would be setting up your schema by using the mongoose.types.objectID type. Okay, and then adding a ref to another collection somewhere else or another model somewhere. Okay, so that's how you would achieve the pattern of relationships, is build it at the schema level. Did anyone have anything different in that instance? So what needs to take place at the schema level is that we have that's pretty straightforward, specific question. And then how do we fill in the appropriate relational data using Mongoose? What's our special method that does this for us? Populate. Almost, Teresa. That says populate, but we'll go with it. I know what you meant. I can give you a hard time. It's Friday. Cool. It's Friday. We are 2 weeks away from Star Wars. But I'm seeing it on the 14th, so I'm really less than 2 weeks. So yes, ref and populate is how we achieve that. So the ref is what we do on the schema level, and the populate is what we do that on when we fetch that information, when we retrieve it from the database. We say, hey, database, at runtime, link up and populate the fields that are necessary. And imagine if you had like an entire nested, collection that you could reference, right? And as long as you have that object ID, it's going to go and run in and grab the fields, and you could have as many fields as you want. So if you had a giant collection, so like an address, like a physical address in like a person so person would be the database, so like user would be the database, and then the address, maybe we want to store those in a different place. Address could have 5 or 6 fields to it. You have street 1 and street 2, addresses. You have city, state, and zip. And then you could potentially put like a phone number or an apartment. So you have all those fields that you could assign to that address, and maybe you don't want to store those as part of the user document. You just want to reference them with an ID and keep them in their own collection somewhere. And that's totally a typical use case for that. So yeah, you would fill it in and say, hey, when we go and fetch the user, here's the user's ID, and here's the ref for that address object when it was created. So go ahead and fill out this information or fill out these fields so that we don't just have an object ID at the runtime. Okay. Last one, describe the MVC architecture, what it is, how we have used it this week with Node Express and Mongoose. So what is MVC? What does that term, what does that acronym stand for, MVC? Yeah, Rashmi, you're supposed to PR all of your sprints when you're done. Oh no, darn it, yeah, that fell through the cracks. Obviously, we need more manpower, more TAs to be able to manage this, and that's how it's going to be in the future. But MVC stands for Model View Controller, the model being what? A representation of what? How our data should be laid out. Yep, it's your data. Your model is your data set. Like the what and the how of our data, right? I guess it's the what and the like we defend it by saying this is why, right? Like, or the what and so the type. I guess it's just the type. Okay, so yeah, data. The model is just your data. View, in our case, we were using routes. Routes aren't necessarily representative of views in the traditional model view controller sense, but we can sort of manipulate that structure. So view would be our routes, right? So where we go and access this information, like what physical address do we have to gain and access this information at? And that's the route level. And then what is a controller? What does a controller do, and what does it achieve for us? It's an action. Tie the models, the routes together. Yep. So yeah, we've been, so MVC is essentially, it's an architecture that allows us to separate concerns into different categories. So our code does different things, right, throughout the process of our application, and we need to be able to keep that clean and neat. And so it really provides us with a way to lay out our code in a way that's really maintainable and scalable as well, because maintainability is scalability by any definition of the word in terms of software development. So, and we've been using it in this model view controller paradigm. You can take this and you can plug it in to your projects, and you can, for forevermore, you can use this paradigm if you'd like. I like it. I think it's really, really organized. Personally, it's something that I would do if I were to write my own personal project starting tomorrow. I would choose, if I were to choose Node, I would lay everything out the way that it has been laid out in class this last week. It makes sense to me that way. And a lot of these paradigms come from like Ruby on Rails, and it just has gained mass population amongst building web servers and web applications. So you'll see it in other popular frameworks like Laravel uses model view controller. And then you'll even see it in front-end frameworks like AngularJS and Ember.js, where you get traditional client-side MVC. Now, if you were to try and apply this to React, what do you think would be the model in a React Redux application? Yeah, so I like that idea. That Dux paradigm is what you're talking about, Thomas. So if you had a Redux React application, what's your model? You sort of have a view model, right? It's like a model of your view. Oh, I thought I had my MacBook charger over there. Yeah, so you have your actions, you have your reducers, you have your components. So component would be what? What's the component in an MVC? Yeah, that would be the view, right? React is the view only, but when you plug in Redux, you get a little bit more out of it. You get a state machine, which isn't a traditional MVC necessarily, but you get sort of you get this sort of data modeled object at the top of your application. So you can sort of start to think of it in that paradigm. Yep, there you go. Luis is, I wouldn't have put it any other way. Cool. And then yeah, your controller would be like the action that binds the two. So your action that binds the model. So your reducers are pretty much your model in most cases, because they represent what your state turns into and how it transforms, or what gets replaced as your state, right? Because they're a pure function that simply just return a new object. So that way you're never manipulating the main object, which is why Redux is pretty dang powerful. But yeah, Redux provides that store for you with those reducers, and that's sort of your data model. Now I've seen it to where like we have a default model, which is our original store that's a giant JSON object at the top of our application before. And so any reducer that comes in will affect a field on that model or something, right? And then return that entire model, so that entire store. And then your view would be your components. So your function components would be your stateless function components, right? And then even because you could have a little bit of application or application state or component state, which would throw you into a loop within a loop, right? An MVC paradigm within an MVC paradigm. So, but yeah, anytime you talk about storage of data or persistence, that can be thought of in terms of a model. What your application should be concerned with, and that's your state. Okay, so anytime you hear state, that's sort of what we're talking about there. And then your view in respect would be anything that a user interfaces with. And so a view with the API could potentially be that URL, right? Because that's what a user interfaces with, is just the URL path. So the route, and then remember the controller binds the two. The controller performs a lot of the heavy lifting, the logic to change something or do something. All right, so you've now seen a couple examples of population in and whatchamacallit. The R word. We were just talking about it. This one, the relationships in Mongo and Mongoose. So I'm not going to go over every single one of these. I don't even want to do any major coding for you guys today, primarily because I want to go in and check all of your sprint reviews. And so what I've done is I've actually reached out to one of your peers, Thomas Dillard, beforehand, and asked if he would show us how he was able to achieve aggregation in terms of these last two stretch problems. So I guess when you're ready, Thomas, the time is yours, and I'll stop sharing and I'll allow you to share your screen. And yeah, I'm really excited. It was a really straightforward way, and it's exactly how I would have done it.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, again, Ryan asked me just to go over the final two, the stretch problems, which is in mine, it's the budget summary and the expenses aggregated by, first I thought we'd start out with the budget summary, where we're just finding the budget by ID. That way we can get the budget amount, and then inside of the callback function, the then function here, we are referencing expense, where we use aggregate. There's really great spreadsheets that Ryan provided on the sprint regarding all of that. So I'm not actually able to tell you what all of this does necessarily, but it basically works as it basically works as a sort of pseudo populate, but inside you're using a function. At least that's the way that I got it through. So first, let's just take a look at, these are all of the expenses here uh, from my local host. And then if we go, I think here it is. This is an example of the budget summary. And it's just, is that right? Yeah, okay. So it's getting the budget that we called, which in this scenario is this one here, which is 3,000. And then it's subtracting the budget amount versus the value total, which is the aggregation of everything. If we just do a, let's go ahead and cut that out, and we can see that this is actually just going to pull the same. That's the wrong one. This should be the same amount. That's interesting. Oh, that's because this one, sorry guys, having a problem here just with some, I didn't drop my database, so there are some files that are null or zeroed out. Here, let's go and grab a different budget.
Cool. Yeah, it's always it's always tough to get put on the spot, you know. I asked him literally a minute before I joined the group, so.
Okay. Only have one budget. Okay. That's interesting. Anyway, sorry about that.
No
Just
problem,
being
man.
driving. Let's
It-
move on to the other one, which is the sort by expenses,
Okay.
or sort by categories here. Uh, well, so the full thing of this is this huge long thing, which I'm assuming gives some sort of rec parameter. But since we were only doing one, I only did this for, uh, yeah, I only did this for categories instead of any of the other options.
Right. Yeah. So that was the idea behind the query string, is to give you an ability to plug in if you wanted to say category or group by expense or whatever. It was just you could build off of this type of pattern. But yeah, for us and our data, it would just be aggregated by the category itself. So like, yeah, group the categories, sum up the total, and then sort them by the amount greatest to lowest. So in descending order would be how
Yep,
that return. So.
very cool. Uh, so if you aggregate, you actually can't sort after that. You can't sort the aggregations. You have to sort within the aggregation.
Yep.
Uh, so yeah, this is very simple here. I suppose Cassidy started a question thread, so I should. Required expenses at the top. Yes, I did here. And then beyond that, here's the expenses sorted by category. Here's the expenses aggregated by category. It's just adding up the total expenses, which was fetched by the category ID, which which is sorted by the. That's the wrong one. That's why I'm getting confused. Which is sorted by the category ID,
Right.
and sum adds it all up.
Yep. An amount is the field you're selecting, right? So even though it has that dollar sign, you're selecting the amount field on that object, right?
That is correct.
Cool. Yeah, and then your total would come out to that. And so, okay. So cool. Yeah. Well done. Yeah, so play around with aggregation. Do you guys have any questions kind of about what this is? A really kind of like, it's a small data set. That's kind of why I alluded to the fact, like, make a lot of categories, add a lot of expenses, and like, you can make this data set. So now that you have a working solution to, your data, your database, you can go ahead and play around with it and add a bunch of things to it. Right. And then play around with aggregations. And then there's a bunch of, if you reach out, or poke me out and remind me, I'll send you some links of places that I've, some URLs that I've found that do some great tutorials on it. I think one of them I linked to you guys. It's a tutorials point on MongoDB in general. And so really, really fun stuff there. So thank you, Thomas. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. You did a great job. Did anyone solve this in any other way, or is there anyone who wants to like volunteer to show their stretch problem? If not, totally optional, totally don't have to. You guys have plenty to continue to work on with your solo projects today while I go about checking in on your pull requests and everything. So if you haven't submitted a pull request for this sprint yet, unless you had talked to me beforehand about some extenuating circumstance today, go ahead and submit it now. Where you're at, and then you can continue to add stuff to it. And I'll if I reach out to you, have something to talk about, we'll talk about it. Otherwise, if I'm not reaching out to you, it's either I ran out of time or felt like you were just right there doing great. So I think I kind of reported to the team today my feelings, my overall reaction to this class, and you guys have been fantastic this week. And yeah, you guys are just moving along at such a great pace, and you're pretty autonomous. There's not a lot of questions that I'm answering all the time, and it's what we like to see. You guys got to this point. You're a couple months in now, and you're crushing it. So I think you're kind of over a hump where like there's no technology you can't learn. If you've survived data structures and algorithms and Redux, you can pretty much do anything you set your mind to, I think, at this point. So a lot of fun stuff coming up next week. Just a couple of house cleaning items. We are starting our schedule at 8 a.m. Pacific next week, so we are an hour earlier than normal. So make sure to adjust your schedules accordingly. Let us know if you have if there's going to be some adjustment period. If you're going to need us to we'll be very lenient. We're kind of throwing this at you midterm, so it's like, we understand if there's people who aren't going to be completely fluid with it. So, but yeah, it just provides a little bit better experience for everyone across the board. Unless you're, on the Pacific Coast, then you have to wake up an hour earlier. So, for me, I'm fine because I'm always up early anyway. But I'm Mountain Time, so barely affected. Let's see. Other housekeeping items. We're going to change the way our afternoons look starting next week. So pretty soon in the future, we're going to have an army of TAs that can come in and provide support to you guys and do group check-ins, where you have like a group of people that you're working with throughout the whole process. We don't know what that's going to look like in terms for you, but for now, because number one, we don't have all the TAs yet. They're coming. But we do have a schedule change in the afternoons coming next week, and so just pay attention to your calendars because the flow of the afternoons, we feel like You guys kind of bang your head against the wall, and then you guys have some questions that may come up, but then you have to wait till like a review and a Q&A at the end of the day, which doesn't make a ton of sense. So we decided to give you, and the way it's going to work out is going to be pretty nice. We decided to give you 2 hours after lunch to bang your head against the projects, and then you'll have like an optional Q&A session in the mid-afternoon where you and your partner could jump in, receive some guidance and some help if you're stuck on something. But if you're in a flow with your partner and you guys are cruising through a sprint, no need to jump into that QA session, right? It's like a total optional thing. And then after that QA session, you'll have 2 more hours to finish up that day. And then on B days, for your project days, when you're working on, integrating these things into your project or just working on your personal projects in general, those afternoons are going to be completely like dedicated to you doing pure 100% like coding on your project. And then, you can reach out for get one-on-one help. There's going to be, some scheduled one-on-one check-ins on those days in the future. And then brown bags and evening time, that evening time last hour of the day where it was QA reviews and brown bags, those are all going away. Brown bags will only be done on Fridays now. And we're going to just take 20 minutes for each person to present something. So if you have something already prepared, try and cut your presentation down to 15 minutes and then a 5-minute Q&A after, because we're going to do 3 students on those days unless we have an outside guest coming in for that hour to present on something. And the reason we love brown bags is because it's a camaraderie piece. Like, we're a remote school and you guys will really get to know each other while you are learning, but it's harder to get to know each other just in this virtual world, right? So since you don't have a physical, like in-person presence, that's what we love these brown bags for. It's a way for you guys to connect to one another. Does anyone have any questions about these changes? I will post an announcement again about this so that everybody knows it. But yeah, just pay attention to the calendar starting next week, watching for those changes. You're already an hour earlier. Let me move into the Slack channel to see what's come up. Yep, Thomas, sorry, you're going to be thrown into C in a couple weeks, my friend. Okay. So Alex, if you feel like you need more time to do your brown bag, we can certainly provide that for you. So Ty for a personal TA. We'll see about that. But Ty is like the leader of all the TAs, but each cohort eventually, the way it's going to work, and I won't go into major details about this, but you're going to have a TA assigned to your cohort that has 6 or 7, or 4 or 5 TAs depending on the class size. So, so you'll have an army of TAs essentially with a lead TA, but Ty will always just be around. So yes, Alex, that assumes you won't do it this Tuesday. So we'll just, anyone who's scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday next week, we'll change the schedule to fit on the Friday after lunch. So, yeah. Christy, that's fine. We will accommodate that. So if you need curriculum in advance or anything, just let us know and we'll try and get that to you beforehand or something to accommodate that schedule. We always record all of our in-class lectures. So the main stuff happens during that morning time block after your code challenge. So. Two to 3 instead of 3 to 4, I'm assuming. So that's nice. Get it real closer to lunch. Yeah, I'm 1 to 2 here. And so now I get like a real 12 to 1. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. We've thought a lot about this schedule. All of the staff are pretty much on board. The TAs are stoked about it. We're excited about what we can achieve with you guys. And it comes from the pain points that we feel like we've been working through. And that's just the best part about running with Lambda School is we're a school, we're a startup. We take things, we take data, and that data drives our decisions forward, right? And so if something's not working, we can literally, pluck it out or change it and tweak it. That's why you guys have brand new SQL curriculum next week, whole week related, revolving around relational databases and stuff. So it's going to be super fun. Luis has been working hard. It is pretty cool school from the comfort of your couch. I don't remember the reasons why, Thomas. I think you would need to talk to Beej Jorgensen about that. He and I think the amount of stuff you can get lost in C++ or the things that would want to be taught is just like insurmountable in some ways for the scope of this class. But teaching you C, and then you guys actually start doing programming challenges in other languages. So I think what we've done in the past is had like a Python week and then had like a Golang week. So you have to like redo some challenges that you've done in JavaScript with new syntax and new language paradigms. It's pretty cool. So the CS portion of the curriculum is unbelievable. And truth be told, I would love to do it with you guys. Like I've never experienced anything like it other than like online training and stuff, like my own self-learning. So I really wish that I was able to like take a month and just hash out all the CS curriculum with you guys. But yeah, maybe in Lambda schools near future. So why is database written as database and not in the Q&A? Are you talking about the sprint, Sandra? Sprint challenge? I think I wrote it so fast. Want to hear my story about the sprint challenge? I'm going to stop recording.